Hey guys, welcome back to the DL. Sorry we took a little bit of a break there. Things just got busy on my end, and trying to just get a gap of time to sit down and chat with you all was starting to get a little bit challenging. So we're back anyway, and you guys are at 7 weeks to go to Ironman Santa Rosa. So again, welcome back. I want to kind of get you up to speed and how things are changing here, and not changing, but really changing considering our weather right now. That'll be one of the things we'll talk about here. So I'm gonna get straight to it. So we're gonna talk logistics, course, and then we had a question that I'm going to tie directly into the course, um, which will make sense, and then some questions that were regarding pacing, and we'll get to later on. This will be maybe more an individual, but a question relative to pacing. But I'm going to do an episode as we get close in terms of gauging your pacing, maybe next week or week after, because you'll want to do some final sessions to have an idea on how to best go about it. So anyway, we'll start with logistics. Right now, at 7 weeks out here from Ironman Santa Rosa, it's interesting that we're here in March, and our weather is more typical now in March of what we'd expect in February or January. A lot of rain, switching between warm rain and warmer weather to cold rain, colder weather, wind, which is sort of what we're getting right now. We're going to have another front go through tonight into tomorrow, Saturday. So those of you, if you're out there and you're watching now and you're out of town but in the region, tomorrow's going to be a little unsettled. It hasn't really been the last couple of weekends. So look at your forecast before you come up and train. If you're in the South Bay here in Northern California, or you're in the East Bay, Sacramento area, something like that, our weather can be different here. We can sit in a pocket, and sometimes it's better or sometimes it's worse. But take a look at that. So logistically, if you're planning to come into town, and we also tend to be colder here in Sonoma County than, say South Bay or East Bay, those areas. So take a look at that. Another thing I want to talk about is water. People still continue to ask about open water swimming, getting to Lake Sonoma swimming. And right now, the good thing is we're getting a lot of rain. It's a good thing in terms of the water quality, the water amounts that we get just for our general environment, because of the rain that we don't get in the summer and the fall. But because of the rain and because of some of the weather that we're getting, the water's cold. Lake Sonoma is cold right now. So it's probably not logistically a great thing to spend all that time to come in, to drive from all the way up to Lake Sonoma and then jump in that lake and just not really get a quality swim in. So if you can wait. If you're already familiar with it, you can bypass it. Again, it's another 40 minutes north from Santa Rosa up there. So just give you an update there in terms of water temp, but also the quality. If it rains, the water quality is horrible. It's murky, it's brown. There's more debris from all the runoff that comes into the lakes. It's not worth the effort to go up there and try to swim if the quality of your swim and maybe not being a safe environment either to do that. So, and the third thing I want to talk about is logistically is course training. I'm getting a lot of questions on, if I come up to train, what's the best way to ride? And most people are coming up and the interest is in riding the course, because that's either it's new from last year, it's new to a lot of people, it's the most dynamic part of the course, as opposed to the run, which will be somewhat straightforward. To be challenging because it's still 26.2, but it's reasonably straightforward. So, and it's a good question, Rita, where do you come up and where do you go and train? And I'd mentioned earlier in the course section when I went over the bike course specifically, a good place to come up and park and train was at Espasti Park, just over the Windsor County line, the Windsor City line at the corner of Old Redwood Highway and East Shiloh, which is where the bike course comes through. So that's one spot. Another really good place to come if you don't want to drive up to Windsor and you just want to come to Santa Rosa, and that way you can check out the run course, or if you want to eat in Santa Rosa, whatever it might be, or logistically it's just easier, is there's a park. It's on the bike course right near the end of the course, as opposed to coming into downtown. And I see these people come into downtown and they park and they ride from there, and they have to ride through in and out of traffic. And I just say skip that. Don't park downtown. You can drop into downtown later and check it out, eat some lunch, eat some dinner, whatever it is you might do if you're coming to train. But a great place to park that we base a couple of our camps out of when we meet athletes there and drive them north, we did transport north to the lake, is you can park at a place to play. It's on West 3rd, and it's right on the bike course. So ideally, the best way to do it and get a good preview of the bike course is a couple ways, but park at a place to play, ride backwards on the bike course so you can see it. You'll see it in reverse, and it'll be, I don't know, 12 or 13 miles going reverse before you get to the intersection of Slusser and Mark West. And if you take a left on Mark West, you're on the bike course at that point. And that's, gosh, I don't know, I should have checked the map beforehand, but you're mile 46, 45, maybe a little bit more than that on the first loop, and on the second loop you're at about mile 96 or 98. So if you go from that point at the intersection of Slusser and Mark West, you've ridden backwards to that point, and now you're just on the course. Take a left at that point on Mark West, and then at that point you essentially be riding what I'm referring to now as the loop, which will be taking you in that big loop around and come back to that point. So follow your bike course instructions, and that way you'll get a really good snapshot of the bike course in itself. And that loop, if you just do that loop, plus you're going to have, you know, a good 16 or 15 miles each way, you end up with about an 83 or 84 mile bike ride when you do that. So that's a really good sizable chunk of the course of doing it that way. If you wanted to ride real long, ride longer, you can do that. And then instead of taking the right-hand turn on Canyon to stay on the loop, you'd get off the loop, go all the way north up to Dutcher Creek, or go all the way up to Lake Sonoma if you wanted to. But and that would make for a significantly longer ride. So you just look at the map and ride it backwards for the first 12 or 13 miles. If you're coming from a place to play, it's 12 or 13 miles. And then you can ride the loop, and that would give you a really good snapshot of the course. And that's where all the dynamic stuff is, all the rolling hills, Chalk Hill Road, which you ride twice, which is, a lot of people are worried about that did the race last year that had never seen that road. So do that. That's just a good way to do it. So take a look at the map and just you can plan it that way. And there's a couple other ways you can do it too. You can park at Lake Sonoma, ride the loop from Lake Sonoma. Easy enough to do it that way if you want to drive up there. So anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about the course, and more so the course cutoffs. I've had some questions in terms of they weren't sure of the cutoffs, and the cutoffs aren't posted yet, mainly because they don't have a new athlete guide up. But the course cutoffs are really almost always the same for all Ironmans, and it really breaks down the simplicity first. Each athlete, essentially, when they step in the water, their race clock starts. So your race clock starts when you get in the water. So when you cross that timing mat, this will be a rolling start at Ironman Santa Rosa, like you're seeing in a lot of races now. And once you cross that timing mat, your race start, your individual clock starts, and every individual athlete has 17 hours to finish the race. So it doesn't matter when you get in the water, you have 17 hours. So you'll have 2 hours and 20 minutes for the swim course, 2 hours and 20 minutes on your clock. So if you cross that timing mat after 2 hours and 20 minutes getting out of the water, which that mat will be near the exit of the swim, you will be disqualified from the race. Now, if you start early and it takes you 2 hours and 30 minutes and there's still people behind you that are on their 2:20, they're going to allow you to continue. But in the timing system, you'll be given a DQ. So you have 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now for the bike, what they'll do is you're going to have 10 and a half hours from the time you start, your race. So 10 and a half hours based on the actual race time when you walk in the water. They will close the bike course 10 and a half hours after the last person goes in the water. But again, if you don't finish the bike in a total race time of 10 and a half hours, you'll be given a DQ. And then we move into the run. And it's the same thing. Everybody has 17 hours total time to do the entire course from the time you get in the water. So from the time you get in the water, 17 hours to finish the race. And I think it's a really good idea to make sure that if you're worried about the cutoffs, keep a running time on your watch, not on the race watch or the race clock, because you might get to the finish line and it's set for 17 hours. The course will close 17 hours from when that last person gets in the water. But if you got in the water 20 minutes before that person and you finish right at 17 hours, you're going to end up with a disqualification. So you'll probably still be on course. You would still go through the timing markers and cross the line. But when your results come up, you'll just be given a disqualification. So I hope that clarifies the questions that people have had in terms of the cutoffs. You're also going to see, and I don't know these yet, I'll know them once I get them to do my race briefings, but they're going to have intermediate cutoffs as well. They will have intermediate cutoffs, probably one on the bike course. I don't know where that would be. Maybe they'll have two, and then they will have intermediate cutoffs on the run, which will typically be after 2 laps of the run course. So if you make the intermediate ones, then those will be hard cutoffs in terms of total time from when the last person goes in the water. So those will be in place. Keep your eyes up for those. Check those in the athlete guide when that comes out. It's important for, I've seen athletes that don't pay attention to their own time with the rolling starts now, and then they sort of lose track of that. And then at the end of the day, they'll finish the race, and they'll say, I came in 15 minutes before the course closed, but it was on their race time after 17 hours or after their 10 and a half or 2 hours and 20. So anyway, so let's go to training. You see a lot of this time of year we're getting with weather being bad now, is people are missing sessions or life gets in the way or whatever it is. So from a training standpoint, if you've been training consistently and you miss a session a week, not that you want to, but if you do, you shouldn't have any problems as long as you're doing all your other sessions and hitting those and you're feeling good and you're doing your workouts. Now, the only thing I'll say is well, first off, don't worry about it. If you're just missing a session a week or a session every 2 weeks, just let it go. Don't try to make it up. The biggest thing I get with my athletes is, hey, can I make up X session? And 90% of the time for me, I'm like, no, we don't need to make it up. Let's just move to the next one and just keep training. Forget about it. It's gone. Now, it's problematic if we keep missing your long or your key swim for the week or bike or run. But if it's the same session every week and it's a key session, then we might need to do some manipulation of your workouts to get rid of something else to put an important workout in. So that would be the only time. And you're not really making it up. You're just swapping it for something else. So if I have an athlete that does their long swim on a Monday and they miss it, they're tired or whatever, and we feel like we can sub that swim later in the week for one of the other swims that we have, then we'll do that. So don't worry about missed sessions, because the reality is if you've been training for a consistent amount of time and a significant amount of time, one session missed in the big world of doing 400 sessions over X amount of time is not a concern. Again, unless it's the same session, it's an important session or the session you just don't like to do on a weekly basis. So keep hitting those, just be consistent and keep working on that. And don't fret if you miss a session, or don't fret if you have a session that doesn't go well. We all have sessions that don't go well. And on the flip side of that, if you have a great session, one really, really good session, it's great that you have it and it's good for confidence, but don't start changing all your markers and all your time goals because of one single session, okay? The other thing I wanted to talk about with training is your gear. Anything from your bike and your run equipment to your swim equipment, whatever it is. Right now is a good time. If stuff's starting to wear out, replace it. If you see it starting to wear out and it's getting close, and you know it's going to get close to race time and it's going to wear out, just replace it ahead of time. Set a reminder, put it in your training schedule, put it in your calendar. Remind yourself to get that stuff switched out. My office is here at Echelon Cycle and Multisport, and they'll start to see bikes. They're starting to see them now. I actually get questions from the mechanics and the guys here, and they ask me about whether it's certain athletes or the types of training that they're doing or where they are relative to races and why they're seeing some of the things they're seeing on bikes. So if you need to get chains swapped out, if things are wearing out, look at your tires and have a plan for that. Don't get yourself up to race week and have bike mechanicals, or we see it all the time. Athletes train really hard and they get on race day and they have things that come loose, things that break. because they haven't taken care of that. So schedule your maintenance in, schedule it in now, schedule it in early. Talk to your mechanic and say, hey, what do you see on my bike that might need replacing to help me ensure that on race day I don't have any problems, and I also have peace of mind that my equipment's going to work, and it's going to work really, really well, and that I can trust it. So take care of your gear, take care of your equipment, make sure your running shoes aren't beat up and worn out, and make sure you just have all those sort of ducks in a row. So don't wait till 2 weeks out to start worrying about that. Think about that now. Even if it means get the bike into the shop and you miss a session because your bike's getting worked on, do that now. That way on race week, or maybe it's 3 weeks out and you had one of your biggest bike rides, you don't have a mechanical before that, and then you miss that bike ride. So equipment, take care of it, it'll take care of you. All right. Just be diligent with that. The last thing I want to hit was questions, and I had a good question, and it talked about pacing. I'm sorry I forgot the gentleman that typed it in, and doing their first Ironman. And it doesn't matter if it's your first or whatever else. Is, how do I get an idea of what kind of time I'm going to do? And if you've done some racing, you can get a general idea. And he said, can I base it off of my 70.3 racing? Well, I think in general a little bit that you can, but the reality is that an Ironman isn't just double the distance of 70.3. It just translates out to more than that. And there's an adage that where a lot of people have used would have said double your 70.3 time and add an hour. But I also think that the longer that you're out there, the more that you're adding more than an hour. I think if you are in the neighborhood of a let's say a 4.5 hour Ironman, a 70.3, then I think that holds pretty true. But again, different people hold their fitness over distances differently, and the longer the race goes, the more things that can happen across the day to get in the way of that goal pacing. So there's really no hard and true way to do it, but here's the way I would think of it. If you're doing your long workouts and you do a particular long workout, and let's say a long bike ride, and you follow it with a transition run, what most people do is they'll have their best bike workout or their best long bike workout or a long run workout, and they gauge it and think, well, that's the pace that I'm going to run my Ironman at. And it typically doesn't happen that way. I think you have to look more consistently over the last 10 weeks. And what has been a common pace or a common speed or whatever it is that you've done these distances over, and then you can get a really, really good idea. It's a long day, and I think you have to be patient. So the reality is, if you've done an Ironman, I think you have a really good idea of what you're capable of. Based on the training that you've done, and is it better or worse than the last block of training you did for your previous Ironman? But if you've never done an Ironman, my advice in terms of pacing is I would don't have any, well, not in terms of pacing, in terms of time goals. Don't have a time goal. Focus on the process. Focus on executing the race the way that you plan to execute it. Paces, power, heart rate, whatever it is, and don't pace your bike off of speed. It's a really bad way to do it, because everything else that you do just gives you the speed that you produce. So worry more about the execution. Go from one to the next piece, to the next piece, to the next piece, and just execute your race. The time will spit itself out at the end of the day. So do be careful with that when you do it. But in terms of pacing, if you've done a 70.3 and you have really good data, let's just say, and heart rate data is or power data is a good one, is you want to go probably 10% lower than that. So if your heart rate, it's 10% lower in heart rate. If you did a 70.3 and let's say your bike power averaged 150 watts and you ran well off of 150 watts, not just rode 150 watts and then ran poorly, but ran well off of 150, then maybe 10% lower is a good number. And for some people, the longer you're out there, the more disparity that is. That number becomes a little bit wider, maybe eke up to 12 and 13 and 14%. So without having hard numbers for people and data, it's really hard for me to say in terms of how to pace it. But we'll get into that a little bit when I do sort of a course pacing one a little bit closer. So anyway, be patient with your training. Keep collecting data and information and making adaptations and making changes. And really, if it's your first Ironman, keep an open mind when it comes to pacing. It just stay within yourself and take care of your business. So I'm going to leave it with that because we're gonna do a sort of a pacing tour, sort of Google Hangout in a few weeks. So listen, let you guys go. 7 weeks to go. You probably have a big weekend of training coming up. Good luck. The weather here is still a little bit unsettled, but we'll be nice in 7 weeks in May for you anyway. But stick to it. And thanks for dropping in. Share this where you can. Ask questions if you need to. And we'll see you. Hopefully, we'll get back to you next week, and we'll keep coming at you every week up until race week and then race weekend. All right. Take care, guys.